Yeah, y'all is your host with the most. Y'all come on in, we're going to have a great show for you. This is your host with the most. Yeah, I know you're not seeing me, but I'm up in here. We're going to have an awesome show for you today. Trauma and its effects. Yeah, come on y'all, let's populate. Y'all know how we do it. Come on, JP. Come on, Master Teacher.
Love is knocking at your door. Love is knocking at your door. Love is knocking at your door.
One love, Scott. Ready, man? I see you, Anthony.
Love is knocking
Hey,
at
LaVale.
your door. Love is knocking.
Hey, Elder Gibbs, the elders in the house.
Love is.
Oh yeah, love is knocking at your door today. Listen, we got two special guests coming in the house today.
Love is knocking. Love is knocking at your door. At your door. At your door. At your door. Well, love is knocking at your door. Love is knocking at your door. Love is knocking at your door. Love is knocking at your
All
door.
right, we're gonna call them on the camera. Come on in, Dr. Lindsay. Oh, we got the doc in the house.
Love is knocking.
Go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Are we ready now?
Introduce yourself to the people.
Greetings, family. My name is Cassandra E. Lindsay, and I hail from Columbia, South Carolina.
All right, we got coming into the room also none other than
Love is knocking at your door. Love is knocking at your door.
Miss Chiquisha. Come on in.
Knocking at your door.
Introduce yourself.
Family, it's so good to be here today. I'm Shakisha Colley, nurse practitioner. A lot of you all know me from being on the timeline, and I can't believe I'm actually here. And I'm excited about sharing this information with you today.
All right, family. Y'all know what we're about to do. We're about to populate. Hey, Shaker. All right, y'all, come on, let's populate. Come on, y'all tell somebody. It's about to go down. It's about to happen.
Love is here to walk with you. Love is here to talk to you. Love is here to wrap his arms around you. Love is here to listen to you. Love is here to advise you. Love is here to love on you. Love, 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 love,
All right, fam. Y'all heard it from none other than JP on the keyboard and none other than the master teacher, the apostle, is playing them congos and those bongos just for your hearing. Listen, we're going to get into this topic, a very powerful topic, trauma and its effects, family. I think this is very important. I think we need to get out ahead of this. Yes, I'm in the studio. This isn't my time in front of the camera. We have two awesome special guests, and they've introduced themselves, and they're going to do it once again. We're going to get Dr. Lindsay to introduce herself once again.
Greetings, I'm Cassandra E. Lindsay, hailing from Columbia, South Carolina. Background is bachelor's license in social work, master's social work, and CI, which is certified investigator for adoptions purposes. 30 years of experience in intellectually disabled and special needs, and 20 years experience in children's services.
Awesome. There you have it. Miss
And
Shakisha.
I am Shakisha Colley, family nurse practitioner. I hail from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm here in Columbia for the first time with the one. I can't be more excited. I'm so happy to be with you all. I've loved getting to know you all on the program, and it is overwhelming to be here with you today. And I just want to be able to share this information with you that I have been trained in to help us start healing from this trauma.
Yes, awesome. Awesome. So let me ask you a question. I'm just going to throw this softball question at you really quickly. You first, Dr. Lindsay. I would like to ask you, what, if anything, do you really think about trauma?
What I think about trauma is actually a makeup of our being as an African descent individuals.
Mm-hmm.
That based upon the intergenerational issues with trauma, what we experience now is a result of what our ancestors experienced.
Okay.
And because they experienced trauma, that trauma was passed down to us. Even though we didn't have the forced ride over from Africa to here.
Okay.
What's gone on there, we are now experiencing it today, just another form. However, it's still genetically passed on.
Yes, still genetically passed on. Okay, Chikisha, if I could ask you a question, what, if you could just kind of describe trauma in some aspect that someone could really relate to it?
Trauma is any type of unexpected event that you have difficulty coping with.
Yes, I agree. That was in a nutshell. Okay, moving right along. You all listen. These women, don't let them deceive you. They're highly skilled, and they know their material. They know exactly what it is that they're talking about. But here's what I need you all to understand, family. I need your attention. I need your eye gates open and your ear gates open, so that we can get this information and get out ahead of the curve. Because I'm telling you, in 2020, the universe is going to open up a door where things that you never thought that were down in you going to come out of you. And I'm telling you, every therapist, every life coach, every motivational speaker, anyone that deals with any level of therapy that deals with people, you better get ready. Because there are all kinds of things that are getting ready to come out of the closet, sort of for speaking. Because the universe at certain times always open these doors, whether you're ready for them or not. So I need you all of you all that are therapists in some kind of way you're relating to people, you're counseling with people, you're doing things with people. Get out ahead of the curve and be ready to address these traumatic issues, because they're going to be genetically related. And if you understand anything about what's happening right now in the theater of thought and behaviorism, it's dealing with trauma. So, and if you understand that, you can understand why we're so heavy here in the truth session on trauma. Yes, of course, you've entered into another truth session. Yes, I'm your host with the most. I am the one, the apostle, the prophet. Yes, I'm in the studio, but today is not my day on the camera. You see who you need to see on the camera. Listen, I need you to give him your full support and your undivided attention, right? Give him your undivided attention so that we can get this thing done. I see you, number one. Hey, Mabel. Hey, Rhonda. What's going on? Okay, so, again, what are we dealing with? Trauma and its effects, right? Okay. Now, Chikisha. Now, I noticed that you were talking about how does traumatic programming received in the theta phase of development, and that's from year 1 through 7, affects overall health, and why is this of special importance in the black community? I'll restate that. Listen, she's getting ready to open this up for us. Assalamu alaikum, Aki Shabazz. Chikisha is getting ready to open this up for us. How does traumatic programming received in the theta phase of development, meaning years 1 through 7, affects overall health, and why is this of special importance in the black community? Can you please speak to that, please?
Yes, I give you a little background. So I graduated in 2003 from the nurse practitioner program at the University of Tennessee, and getting an education in the Western model of education is the Western model of medicine. Is the body is a mechanism.
Okay.
And you almost treat it like a car. And you're treating physicality.
Okay.
We were not taught that the origins of so many of our illnesses are mental.
Okay.
Now they are starting to know
Mm-hmm.
These are the origins.
Mm-hmm.
Physical illness comes from mental dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a issue where you have a birth defect, if it's not an issue of a physical trauma, a lot of that comes from how you think. And so the trauma that we receive being of African descent in this country, we can't avoid it. They talk about these trauma events affecting you. Some people have traumatic events. How many traumatic events have you had from 0 to 7? As a Black American, there's no 0.
Mm-hmm.
There is no 0. And how many you have, you probably can't count. And these traumatic events cause us physically to be in that heightened flight or fight stage where we're releasing these hormones that do damage to our bodies.
Okay.
And that is why it's so important for us to start addressing the real cause of illness in our community. We're known for having diabetes. We're known for having high blood pressure. We're known for having a disproportionate amount of cancer. Why is that? They wanted to tell us it's just our genetics. It's not just our genetics.
So it goes beyond genetics.
It's what we have to deal with.
Okay. Can you kind of explain a little bit in terms of what we have to deal with, stress factors, dealing with situations, how you can explain that to us so we can get a deeper understanding of that, please?
They now know that discrimination causes a chronic stress state.
Say that again?
Discrimination
Mm-hmm.
has been proven to cause a chronic stress state.
Okay. And once that chronic stress state happens, what ensues?
So, besides the mental illness that you're going to get from being in a chronic stress state, which Dr. Lindsay will address, you're going to have, and I've put it up here, you're going to have 2 pathways that you take to illness.
Okay. And what are those going to be?
And those are going to be metabolic,
Okay.
or it's going to be behavioral,
Okay.
that are going to affect your physical illness.
Okay. Now, can you please elaborate on, in terms of the metabolic, please?
So
The
metabolic,
Yes.
most of us are familiar with that fight or flight, heightened state.
Okay.
You are constantly releasing cortisol,
Okay.
norepinephrine,
Okay.
adrenaline.
Okay.
These are hormones that you are supposed to release if a lion is chasing you,
Okay.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
But as a Black person in America, as a Black, especially a Black male in America,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to be at that heightened state
Okay.
chronically.
Chronically.
So chronically, you are releasing these hormones, which if you release them acutely, you would, it would be a good thing.
Okay.
It lets you get ready to move. It lets you get ready to get out of the way of that lion.
Okay.
So blood is being pumped more to your extremities.
Okay.
Your blood pressure is going up. Your heart rate is going up. But what happens if that is your state all the time?
Tell us what happens.
So that's the metabolic pathway
Okay.
for illness.
Okay.
So you, in that constant state
Mm-hmm.
of increased cortisol, increased stress hormones, like I said, you're going to have increased heart rate. This is why we have the epidemic of high blood pressure. It's going to cause increased blood sugar levels. So diabetes, your immune system is going to down regulate.
Okay.
So what happens if your immune system is not on alert for the assaults that you are going to receive, or even just the regular things that happen in your body? You're always making cancer cells. Your
Okay.
immune system will kill them. If
Okay.
your immune system is down regulated,
Then it increases your ability or chances of catching cancer.
of having a cancer state,
Okay.
it increases your probability of having an autoimmune disorder.
Okay.
So we're talking about rheumatoid arthritis. We're talking about sarcoidosis.
Okay.
We're talking about lupus.
Mm-hmm.
All those autoimmune disorders. It's going to increase your probability that you're going to have that because your immune system is not on watch the way it should be.
Okay. So now, if we're hearing you clearly, what you're saying is that there is something that precipitates these things, that causes these things to happen. That they're not just there. They just don't fall out of the sky. They just don't come. You just one day wake up and have it. There was a reason why.
Right.
So, and there was two pathways as you're explaining to us. I think this is so important that we really need this information drummed home, that there was a reason why cancer cells has the ability to increase, and increasing it is due to the immune system not properly being regulated.
Correct.
Could we safely say that?
Correct.
Okay.
That's why we have the disproportionate amount of cancer in our community.
Okay. Oh my God. Thank you for that. Listen, family, this is why we need to share. Y'all need to be hitting that share button. I see you, Pastor Lonnie Johnson. This is why we need to hit this share button. Hey, Alicia. I see you, Andre. Is that Andresha? Andresha? Okay. This is why it's very important. So, Doc, we're gonna let you jump in here. And let me ask you something. Let's talk about how are we impacted by trauma. And I want you all to be able to talk back and forth to each other in terms of information that you all want to relate to each other.
Okay, great.
But how are we impacted by trauma?
We're impacted by trauma, and that trauma could be a result of a one-time event, multiple events, long-lasting events. And each person is affected differently. Is what happens. Now, as a result of that trauma, what they've said in terms of when we look at developmentally, if you're young or old, what they're saying is that when you're younger and you have experienced trauma at a younger age, then you tend to have anger, anxiety, sadness, and shame. As opposed when you're an older adult and you have some experience, you have basically some life experiences, you don't process the trauma the same way.
Okay.
Okay. And what's that's called emotional deregulation, which is also called emotional hyperactivity.
Okay.
Is what they're saying. So what happens is that they're saying your initial reaction for trauma is exhaustion.
Okay. Always tired.
Always tired.
Okay.
You're confused.
Okay.
You're sad.
Mm-hmm.
Agitated.
Okay.
Numbness. And disassociation. And Chakisha and I were talking about this because we were talking about the issue of numbness. And we were talking about numbness in the event when one of the other things they talk about is that people who experience trauma and they, on a consistent basis, they don't have any hopes for life.
Okay.
So we were talking about gang members and them talking about, we don't really care. We're not going to live past 30. So we're going to do what we do. Well, that's the issue of numbness. Because what happens when you're constantly seeing friends, relatives, or people in general die?
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you're desensitized.
Okay.
And if you're desensitized, then you're numb. It's just another person dead. There's no significance to it. So that was something that had been discussed and saying that, you have your physical arousal, which when you have the physical arousal, then you're dealing with the metabolic stage.
Right.
You know, you're in your fight and flight stage.
Okay.
So that's
Can you kind of touch on
things.
that a little bit? What happens? You get in a flight and fight.
This is
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Kind of talk about that just a little bit because this is important.
Okay.
That heightened state of awareness
okay.
and what it is really doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we understand that to a level where we can grasp it and kind of get some type of therapy for it.
Here's when she touched on it a little bit. What they're saying in the article, it talks about the African community and the psychological effects of trauma, and with that, it talks about the offspring's parents and how they're affected by trauma and what is exhibited by, and it talks about depersonalization, isolation. It talks about because you are a descendant of slavery, there is a perpetuation of social and institutional inequality, racism, and oppression. If you're constantly experiencing racism, if we're just truthful about it, we are in a climate nowadays that is being stoked.
Yes.
Racism is being stoked.
Okay.
So if you're in a climate that racism is being stoked, then what happens is that you stay in that position of fight or flight.
Okay.
Because what is it? You're always at a heightness of awareness of trying to, I guess, protect yourself.
Okay.
Because you may think something is coming for you. Because something is or someone is coming for you. You
Okay.
know, another thing that was pointed out is that because people who have been colonized, we're colonized people.
Okay.
That itself was trauma. And if we think about it, they colonized Africa. But did they not do the same thing in America?
Correct.
What are the ghettos?
Yes.
Who's colonized in the ghettos? Those ghettos were specifically designed for certain individuals, and those certain individuals are us. So in the ghettos, what are the home and the living situations are like? We talked about metabolic. What about the quality of the apartments? You know, roach infested. What do you have as a result of roach infestation? What do you get from that?
Respiratory illness.
Respiratory illnesses.
Respiratory illnesses, which goes back to what the immune that's going to be linked when you have respiratory situations. That's going to go link back to the immune system. Is that correct? It's going to get into your pneumatical system.
Correct.
Where it starts to deal with your wind, your air, how you breathe, and what you're breathing in. If you're taking the toxins or whatever you're doing, so it's going to tend to that. I remember when we had the problem with lead
Right.
in the low housing, low social economic allocated areas where we had the lead problems. So we know what lead leads to. It's going to lead to what? Brain
Damage.
brain-
Mental retardation.
Yes, mental retardation.
Is what it does. Because the
Right.
lead is poisoning. They're telling the children were eating the lead because the paint chips were sweet. That's why they were eating.
Oh,
paint.
wow.
The paint chips are sweet. The lead paint is sweet.
Okay.
So they're ingesting those,
Wow.
which indeed affects the brain, which causes mental retardation.
Mental retardation.
Yes, it affects brain development. So the potential that you had at birth is being taken from you. It's being taken from you. And they showed studies where at 6 years old, they looked at the brain, looked at it again at 14 years old, where you're supposed to be having constant brain development. And there are less connections at 14 than there were at 6.
Oh, my.
And you're supposed to be increasing those connections. But exposure to things like lead, just exposure to general trauma, is going to affect the brain and how it functions. And then as you get into the educational system, they want to know why you can't meet those expectations that they have.
And when you said the connections aren't being made, what are the connections? What's being affected?
The connections between the dendrites in the brain.
Okay. The dendrites in the brain, they're not properly connecting
Right.
from one side to the other side. It's not properly sending in information for the development of the brain. Would it be safe to say that?
Yes.
Okay. Let me. What would be if, say, for example, Dr. Lindsay, if someone came into your office and you need to do assessment on them, and you knew they were suffering from some level of trauma, how would you deal with that person?
What happens is that we have had a shift in terms of the way we approach someone when it comes to therapy. As Shakisha said, a lot of things have been based upon the medical model. What happens is that you find, quote, the illness, and you treat the illness as opposed to treating the entire person. So now what you have, and what the new push in the wave is called trauma-informed care.
Okay.
And what you want to do with trauma-informed care is that you become basically a working partner with the individual that's coming in for therapy. What happens now is that you don't come in and see me. I don't do an assessment. I make the determination what it is you should work toward in order to meet your goals. What happens now is that you and we sit down and we discuss where you are, things that you think are important. In the event you can't identify those things that you think are important or those things that you feel are most troubling, then I present you with some information. We talk about it. From the conversation and those narratives, we then determine this may be a step for you to work toward. So I'm not so much concerned that you are showing and exhibiting signs of schizophrenia. I'm more concerned about what is the inception of the schizophrenia. We know there are chemical imbalances in the brain, but everything is not a chemical imbalance, is it, in terms of schizophrenia?
No, a lot of it has to do with how you think, the way you've been taught to think. We really have been taught that it's all just chemicals. But why are those chemicals imbalanced? And we don't address why the chemicals are imbalanced. We just give you a pill and never address the problem.
Okay, so, I mean, if someone come and sit down in your office and you assess them, with that, what would you do? What would you say to them?
Well, when it comes now to how we're being educated to give trauma-informed care, it's important to know that most of the people that you are dealing with, a good percentage of the people that you're dealing with, have had some form of trauma. And a lot of times the medical environment is very triggering, and you do not want to re-traumatize when you are trying. They are there for healing, and you don't want to re-traumatize them. So it is more of a letting the patient know that you're here to work with them, answer their questions, at all times make sure they are comfortable, that anything that you recommend that they do is their choice.
Yes.
Whether they do it or not, they are in charge. They are in charge of their own bodies, because that's a lot of trauma, sexual abuse, domestic violence. You don't have control of your own person. And then you come into my office and I want to take your control as well. The doctor as God can do anything that he wants to do. But with understanding that we need to give trauma-informed care, we know that we need to make sure that you feel empowered. And there are is it five?
Yes, the 5 pillars.
Five pillars of trauma-informed care
Yes.
that we are now realizing are very important.
Can y'all briefly
Discuss
state
those?
those? Yes, discuss
So,
those.
you have the 5 guiding principles of trauma-informed care. The first being safety, the second being choice, the third being collaboration, the fourth being trustworthiness, and the fifth being empowerment. So the issue of safety is to ensure that the patient is in safety physically as well as emotionally. And from there, it's a choice. The individual makes a choice, as she said. Do I want to go forward with this or not? And then we're not trying to force them to do that, because we still know people are involuntary committed all the time. A lot of times it may not be because of them, it could be because of their families. From there, you have a collaboration. And with that phase, what happens is that you make decisions with the individual sharing their power. So I don't say to you, well, I think you need to do X, Y, and Z. I'm asking you, what do you feel about this? What are some ways you think that you can handle this situation? Okay, you're having nightmares every night, and the nightmares is re-traumatizing you from the initial trauma event. What are some things that we may be able to work toward where you won't have those nightmares so prevalent? Okay, then from there you have trustworthiness, which is the tasks are clearly and consistently defined. We also understand that boundaries are interpersonal, okay? So we have boundaries here. We need to stay within our boundaries. Because as clinicians, when you think you're the father and authority of things, then you'll overstep your boundaries many times, because a lot of times what happens, we've been actually trained to feel that we are only ones with the right information. And we only ones have the right to, and we can only have the way to show you what needs to go on.
Okay.
And then the last step is the step of empowerment.
Okay.
We want to be able to give that power back to you.
Okay.
We just want to assist you to get to that place that you can take your power and you can work with your own power for trauma. It's what happens with that. Yes.
So, again, first it's going to be safety,
Yes.
then choice,
Yes.
then collaboration,
Yes.
then trustworthiness,
Yes.
and empowerment.
Right.
So in that, when you get to safety, you're ensuring physical and emotional safety. Why would you be ensuring that? Why would you want to ensure that when someone comes into your therapy session, that you want to ensure that? Why?
From my perspective, and I can take from working with domestic violence, when you have a individual that has experienced domestic violence, there's no need to work with the trauma until you ensure that they're safe. If you can't get past being safe, then you can't make any other steps. So I need to ensure that you're in a place that is safe, that you can't be re-traumatized.
Okay.
It's what needs to happen. So I want to make sure, I want to say, can you return to your home? Or if you can't, let's find alternative placement for you.
Okay.
Someplace where indeed you will be safe.
Okay.
Yes. And then with that, because women who've been abused, they are always hypervigilant. It's the least
touch on that,
noise.
please. Touch on that.
The least glasses drop, they're jumping.
Yes. Oh
You
my
know,
God.
there's a state of paranoia.
Yes.
You know, and not only that, because I worked a shelter, the stories.
Yes.
Oh, I have a husband that can come through any security system. So I'm not sleeping at night, because basically you have a woman that's pacing the floors because she's afraid at any moment he's going to come in. You know, so you have to get them to a place. And a lot of times you can't stay within your area. You're going to need to go someplace else. You know, just to be there. Or if you have an abuser, that's in law enforcement.
Oh my God.
To look at the safety measures from that.
Yes. That's going to be kind of hard to make that
Yes.
adjustment, isn't it?
Yes. And I can say we're getting a little better in South Carolina now. Now we will pay a woman attention. One time we wouldn't.
Okay. 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 So, Chiquisha, if someone comes and sat down in your office, and you're trying to get with them, but you see that they have in some way been abused, physically and or emotionally, what are some of the things that you're gonna deal with them?
A lot of it is about communicating that rapport, letting them know that you are there to help them, not just treat them as a number, that they are an individual, that you are here to form a relationship with them that is going to lead them to their healing.
Okay. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, in your practice, because you are a nurse practitioner by trade, profession, in your practice, when you have had a client come in or a patient come in, and you see that maybe they have been abused or they're going through some level of trauma, what is your approach to that? Because I think there are those that are listening and that are going to be listening today, tomorrow, and beyond in my Queen Brenda Brown's voice. today, tomorrow, and beyond, they'll be listening. What would you say?
What about the 10-year-old that was pregnant? What about the 10-year-old that was pregnant? How was that handled?
Well, that wasn't handled well.
She had a 10-year-old that was pregnant.
That was not a good example. We spoke about a 10-year-old who was pregnant that didn't want to have the gynecological examination that she needed.
Mm-hmm.
And the typical medical model is force her, shame her, let her know that you are the authority and she will do what you tell her to do.
Okay.
The way to approach that in trauma-informed care is to let her know she has the right to refuse.
Mm-hmm.
She has the right to refuse.
I want you to go back and restate something. I want you to go back and restate what you just said in terms of shaming, taking authority over someone, causing them to do what you want to say. Say that again so that our people can really understand how the system really operates in terms of hypnosis, hypnotizing you, dealing with you in a way that they'll cause confusion in you to gain control and authority over you.
That is the medical model. That is the medical model. So what they're doing really is tapping back into your trauma. That's what they're doing. They're tapping back into your trauma where you have been made to be submissive. And they are going to just take the place of your abuser and trigger that already programmed idea that you need to do what you're told. That you need to do what you're told. And so that is what they're going to do. And so the medical system is making it worse, re-traumatizing you. That's why so many people don't want to go to the doctor. They have symptoms, they have illnesses, but they don't want to go to the doctor because they're being triggered. And a lot of times they don't know why they're being triggered. They don't know what it is that's making them uncomfortable. They just know that they don't want to be there.
And then to also understand, if you look at us as a nation of people, nationality of people, and black people in particular, we don't want to go to the doctor because of the experiments that have been carried out on us. We've gone to the doctor for a toothache and lost our hand. We had the whole syphilis experiment that went on. So you are going for a treatment, but you're being made a guinea pig. And then we know up until almost the late 90s, they were still experimenting on young black boys in the ghettos. And they were doing it under the auspices that if the mother would allow them to take certain shots, they would give them gift cards. We also know historically that black people have been always prescribed higher doses of medication, and especially psychotropic meds. We know that as well. They over-medicate us.
Yes.
And I want to touch on that,
Yes,
the psychotropic medication, because it goes back to another metabolic reason for illness that originates in trauma. So you're presenting with these psychotic mental illness symptoms. And so what am I going to do as a practitioner? What have I been trained to do? Give you an antipsychotic medication, which if you take it over time, is likely to cause you to become diabetic. Wow. So in trying to get treatment, that is another way we become ill.
Yes. Okay, so let me field a few remarks and comments out here. And if you all have questions, please put them on the timeline. So if you have questions for the ladies, please. Sister Ronnie Moore says, the town that I am from, the projects are right across the street from the chemical plants.
Yeah.
Allied with chemicals and Firestone. Okay. Mabel Cole says, love the way everything has been explained and the great interaction and communications between me and the two strong black sisters, the women. Yes. Okay. Lavelle says, exactly, it may cause more damage to the body as well as the brain. And Mabel Cole says, once again, I'm here to listen and learn from these strong black women. Awesome. And they really appreciate that, Mabel. And Shadron, which is one of my daughters also, she says, when we are safe, we are more open to pour out the deep things that the trauma is normally rooted in, and we are more open to receive the healing necessary to become whole. What do you all think about that comment?
I feel that when you are in a place where you're safe and you feel safe, you are open to disclose.
Okay.
However, I also believe with that, being able to disclose, I'm more likely to disclose and feel safe with someone who looks like me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's important.
Yes.
That's something that a lot of us don't get the opportunity to have. So much so that when I have patients who are of African descent, you walk into the room and they light up because it gives you that comfort level that you're talking to someone who understands your experience. And most of the time we're dealing with people who don't understand our experience. And we're not going to feel comfortable giving them information about our experience.
Yes. Because the reason why I'm asking, because see, and Cassandra also is a licensed social worker, so she's had all kind of encounters with people and behavior.
Yes.
Can you?
We were laughing. She and I were laughing about it the other night. We were just talking about experiences we've had with working, and we were literally talking about because we both have done home visits, and we've gone into homes, and we were laughing because she was talking about, I guess you get around to some mountain areas is what's happening. You're going up in the mountains. She got different kind of people in the mountains. Well, I was telling her I'd gone out to see an older lady because her daughter had requested that she be placed in a nursing home. And so the daughter and I had been conversating. I was telling her what my process was going to be. So by that time, her mom comes out, little lady, and she looks at me and she said, "Who you, gal?" So I told her my name. She said, "You my new housekeeper?" I said, "No, ma'am, I'm not. I'm here to help your daughter." I didn't want to say, "Your daughter's going to put you in a nursing home and sell your house. That's why I'm here." She wants to make it expediently. I didn't say that. So I said, "No, ma'am, I'm not here for that." I said, "I'm a social worker." She said, "They let you people be social workers now?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, they sure do. They most certainly do." She said, I said, "Yes, ma'am." Continue right on with my work. And I mean, to me, now that was back in the late 80s. We're now in the year 2019, and we got some of the same behaviors.
Or worse.
Or worse.
Or worse.
Yes.
Or worse.
The climate now. What more can you say? We all know it's worse. People feel empowered to say whatever they want to say to us that they've been holding in for years. So now they have the go ahead to say those things. And one of the funny incidences we were talking about, I went up into the mountains one time, and you know, the isolated area, and drive up to the man's house, get out of my car to give him a medical assessment for Medicare. And the first thing he says to me is, "We don't get colored people up here." The first thing he said to me. Now, we don't get colored people up here.
What was your response?
I said, well, I believe you. Because inside, I don't want to be here. But my response is, I believe you. I'm sure that's true. Now, let's do the work that we're here to do. And this is another example of what we are all having to deal with. So even in professional settings,
Yes.
we are being re-traumatized in just doing our jobs.
Yes.
We are being re-traumatized.
What I feel is that if you do not encompass the Eurocentric thinking, then basically what you are is, quote, radical.
Mm-hmm.
Is what you are. My hair is locked. I'm looked at strange. And I'm also sized up as if I'm dumb, is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then I just start giving you credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And I quote tell you the schools I went to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's, it's because it's a certain perception that comes along with it.
Correct.
And even with the most ignorant individuals, there is a sense of thinking they're higher and there's more privilege for them than it is for you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sister Lavelle, which is one of my daughters, also says strokes and also seizures.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rhonda says, I don't trust Western medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lavelle says again, showing them comfort, trust, and good communication skills with them, where the client will have great trust in you, helping and healing them with their trauma. This is correct, which you all spoke on.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sister Shadron says, safety is a must
Yes.
in order for healing to take place.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. And also Sister Shadron says, when we are safe, we are more open to, again, we stated that one. I'll just read it again. To pour out the deep things that the trauma is normally rooted in, and we are more open to receive the healing necessary to become whole, which she stated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. See. Okay. Moving on. Okay. Okay. Okay.
I see one by Mabel Cole.
Yes, go ahead.
It says behavior is taught, racism
Mhm.
is taught, and
Mhm.
handed down from generations to generations.
Mm-hmm.
So is trauma.
Yes.
And
This
it's
is true.
intergenerational trauma.
Okay, can someone speak to that intergenerational?
We talked about a little about epigenetics, and Keisha was explaining to me how your genes can change genetically.
Mm-hmm.
There could be changes in your genes, and just from what I've read is that the trauma can change the genes. And the conversation we had is, I said, if you think about this, if indeed as a woman with children, I watched my husband be beat and torn apart by horses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's trauma that's now instilled.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ensure that my children do whatever it needs to be done to keep them from dying. But they also experience that trauma. So that's going to be secondhand trauma for them, right? So what happens? We both carry those genes now. Those children are going to take those genes, and when they decide to marry with someone else, they too are going to carry those genes right on. And a lot of times what happens, we indeed are marrying our culture, but everyone comes traumatized. So we have genes that's traumatized. Then that's where we're talking about the issue of epigenetics and how your genes can be changed. And they're changed because of the trauma.
Certain genes are upregulated. So when we were talking about cortisol, and I believe Apostle Clay addressed this in Truth Session a couple of weeks ago, that there's an upregulation of the gene that releases the glucocorticoid hormones, the cortisol, the norepinephrine, the adrenaline. Those genes are turned up. And so it just presets you for everything that you're going to experience too. But that's how you carry your ancestors' trauma in a physiological way.
Mm-hmm. Say it again. Repeat that, because so our audience can get that.
So that's how you carry your ancestors' trauma in a physiological way, that your genes are upregulated, your heightened state of awareness genes, your genes that are going to cause you to develop hypertension, develop diabetes, develop respiratory illness. Those genes are upregulated, and that is the way that your ancestors' trauma manifests itself in you physiologically before you were even birthed.
Mm. Wow. So it's genetically passed on. which is why when you go into Western medicine or whatever, they're
Yes.
asking questions like, well, was there anyone in your family with heart disease, kidney problems, or
High blood pressure.
yeah, high blood pressure?
Yes.
Yes, and that's the particular reason why, because genetically it is passed on, correct?
No.
Well,
Well, this is the thing.
yes.
They're not asking you that because they're aware of the epigenetic part of it where these genes are upregulated because your ancestors have had trauma. They're just the idea is that you're defective. You know, so you just have naturally defective genes
Okay.
because you are of African descent. So it's innate in you to have these illnesses. It's not innate in you to have these illnesses. The trauma that your ancestors experienced caused those genes to be turned on.
Okay.
That is the reason why you're going to be more susceptible. But when they look at it, they're just looking at it like, okay, so your grandfather had this, your grandmother had this, your brother had this, and just thinking of it as straight genetically inherited disease. But it is because of those genes being affected by the trauma that they experienced.
Okay. Now, okay, that's interesting because I need to catch up with this. Okay, so what is actually happening to us is that because our amygdala is creating a state of heightened awareness and causing our adrenaline to secrete at an alarming rate because we're in this state so often that it affects the genes of our ancestors. Am I correct? Those ancestral genes that where they have been traumatized, now we turned that on.
Right.
It's now turned on in us because of the upsurge of energy that's turning it on.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
So it's already there. For lack of a better term, quote, you're predisposed.
Yes. Okay, so now, for me, I remember when I went to the optometrist. She asked me, she said, well, I see your paperwork. You don't have any illnesses on here. You don't have high blood pressure. You don't have diabetes. When was the last time you went to the doctor? I said, what do you mean? Well, normally, most black men at your age, they have one of the other or all of them. I said, well, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't. I said, because I eat healthy and I exercise and I take care of myself. She couldn't believe it by looking at me, and when I feel the paperwork out, couldn't believe it. One of the things that we really do in terms of how we keep ourselves fit, we'll determine what turns on and what has the ability or a pathway. And you're talking about those pathways, which is very interesting.
It just makes me think about, you touch on how you take care of yourself. And therefore you don't have that disease that normally should be there, they think normally should be there. But the beautiful thing about Apostle Clay is it's not just that he takes care of himself physically. He brings us together as a community. That's one of, the ways that you can affect and heal trauma, and heal those illnesses that are caused by trauma. You definitely better diet, exercise, but you need a community. You
Yes.
need support.
Yes.
We need to learn how to love each other again. We
Yes.
can love each other to healing. Those things have been found to be just as effective as eating well
Yes.
and exercising, because you think about some of the food that our ancestors ate that wasn't necessarily so good for the cardiac system, for your arterial system. And why didn't it affect them like it affects people now?
Right.
Because they had community.
Right.
They had support.
Yes. Yes, that is so true. So true. Let me read a couple more of these comments here. And then we're getting ready to wrap it up, fam. So if y'all want to get a comment out there, go ahead and get it out there. Yeah, what is your medical history? That's right, Calvin. Sister Rhonda says, I watched my mother and her relationship with my father that was a mess and caused me much trauma. Moreover, I lost a bit of respect for my mother because she seemed so weak. And we've seen those situations. Post-traumatic slave disorder, yes. Sister Lavelle says, a pattern of defect that has not been healed, traumatic dysfunctions from the ancestors. We call it cord cutting the cords. Yes, and we're familiar with that process. Sister Calvin says, because if your mother and or father had it, the probability of you having it is greater. The doctor's favorite statement, yes. Okay. And Lavelle says again, absolutely a lot of red meat and pork. She was talking about in terms of health issues.
Right.
Okay, so in closing, we talked about it because we're talking about safety, choice, cooperation, meaning community, family, coming together. And if people would see us, they would think like, wow, do Apostle them really do that? We get together and man, we turn it up.
Yep.
We level it up to create energy. When you come together, start singing and dancing and moving around, it creates energy. It creates healing energy.
Yes.
We're laughing at each other, laughing at one another, like, man, did he just do that? We be falling out, laughing. And we know what laughter does. Laughter releases endorphins. It creates medicine within your body. It releases and gives you that natural high. You naturally get high, and you just be high and laughing. And it's healing. So that's cooperation. So when we come together, and then when we come together, we're together because there's a level of trustworthiness that we want to be in the midst of each other. I think that's very important, as even Chiquisha has mentioned. But in closing, what I want you all to touch on is empowerment. How to get yourself to a place. If you know that you've had some type of traumatic experience, man, where you allow someone, man, really to just kind of speak with you, talk with you. How do you empower someone to do that?
My thing is that I think that you indeed have to make connections. Shakisha talked about it earlier about what Apostle provides, you know, the space and place that he provides to indeed, because if you don't ever get to a place of trusting anyone, you're not going to ever get to a place of healing what you have going on. So you indeed have to make that first step to actually reach out for the healing process to begin from the trauma. And indeed, community is the one way and the one thing that has to work. You have to have community. And to understand community does not mean who's right next door to you. Nowadays, with times and technology, community is just a press of a button away. You know, of course, we know teleconference is a big thing for therapy now. Go on the internet and talk with your therapist through Zoom. So that's the thing. Get that, you make that connection. Reach out to someone that you really feel you can trust. And if you can trust that person, if they can't do it, they could have someone that can do it, that they trust. I think that's important.
To get to that place of empowerment, a lot of us, we need the previous person who's already gotten there. So once you get there, that person reaches out to get you. And you have to be willing to open yourself up to that. That's one of the biggest steps in getting that empowerment, is find who can give it to you.
All right, family. Hey, it's that time. I know that you all have enjoyed these sisters. Listen, go back and listen to the information again because they are giving some keys. They're giving some real good information. Listen, y'all know who I am. I'm your host with the most, baby. I'm the one, the apostle, the prophet. Listen, I've been in the house all the time. Listen, none other than the doc on my left. Come on here, in the doc on my right. Listen, in their own right, we got Cassandra and Chiquisha in the house, and they're gonna take it out. Listen, one love.
Goodbye from Cassandra.
I've been Shakisha, your nurse practitioner.
Yes, I am.